Etherization, Vedran is here, one of the earliest NFT projects. I'm going to put an asterisk there because it is hot debate within the NFT community. I'm so glad that I could have you come on and we can discuss everything that's happened around Etherization, your OG status. I know you've been in the space for a long time. So, Vedran, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. And for those that are listening, there's a little bit of static in the background. We'll edit it, and we'll get everything going. So first and foremost, this is the first time that I've seen you. I know you've been fully doxxed. I've seen it. I've seen this mentioned many, many times. But now we get to sit here and have this conversation. Tell us a little bit about who Vedran is. How did you find yourself into the crypto space, and then eventually into creating an early iteration of a non-fungible token plus game?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll go quickly through the basic crypto stuff. I first found out about Bitcoin, I think in 2012. That's not so relevant, so I'll go quickly through that. I just read some IEEE paper. I thought it was great. And I even put some Bitcoin ATM in Zagreb, Croatia, and so on. But as I'm a programmer, so when Ethereum came about, I found out about Ethereum before it actually launched in 2015. But I saw something really interesting was happening at one conference in Vienna, Austria, where Vitalik was there. It was like his status was then very, I mean, you could see that something was happening, but it was really easy to come to talk to him. There was like just, today it would be impossible. So yeah, that was 2015, I think. And then, I started learning about Solidity, and I just came up with this idea to have, a strategy game that would be similar to Civilization, which I enjoyed playing when I was younger and even a bit later. Because I thought it's something that would live forever, and you would instead of just playing and then game finishes, you could actually have real money moving here, and the whole mechanic would be transparent. So that's really. I knew, Solidity was much more than that, but I thought this is also a great learning project, and I developed this game in 2016, and the basic idea was you could build cities, and you could have armies in cities. You had a treasury and some buildings, and then you could conquer neighboring cities and so on.
All right, and we'll dive a little bit into the mechanics here in a second. But as it says on the website, and as we know, it's a play-to-earn game, potentially one of the first play-to-earn games that were created on Ethereum. It predates even the ERC20 standards, so it's just like a complete customized contract. You mentioned that you were inspired by Civilization, the actual Web 2 game. Was there any sort of cryptocurrency or any sort of crypto product that inspired you to put this type of game on the blockchain, or was it basically you just, from your history of playing Civilization, you wanted to try to mimic that on Ethereum?
Yeah, it just came to my mind like that.
Okay,
it was not something other in blockchain space. It was just this game and the fact that I understood what smart contracts were about. So these two just came together.
Right. Yeah. As we know today, right, looking at things retroactively makes it look more simplistic. Etheria was the first NFT game, I guess, for today's standards. It's all customized. But I know there's a handful of other 2016 NFT projects that exist out there, which becomes interpreted by the community and the developers, right? And this is what causes a lot of animosity within the community, because we are debating semantics, right? At the end of the day, what's transferable, what's not transferable, so on and so forth. But here's the game. I have it pulled up. Etherization, you can see that there's different quadrants. Oops. So we could see here which we'll dive this a little bit. When you had first deployed the game, when you had first deployed the game back in 2016, was this the original website? Is this originally what it looked like?
No, it looked a bit different because actually cities were not unique. So that's something that, as you mentioned, this is something to discuss in terms of to what extent was the original game about each city being an NFT. So actually back then you even didn't have concept of NFTs. So each city was just like a storehouse for units and buildings, and it had a name. So the names that existed. So back then you had only around 50 cities. So these could be then revved to tokens, and the name was transferred, but the images were newly assigned. So it would be more precise to say that the game is about the land, which is from 2016, rather than those being fully cities being really NFTs back then. And there's another important point when it comes to mechanics. You could actually conquer cities in the original mechanics, and that's something we turned off this mechanic because obviously if you have an NFT, you don't want someone to just be able to conquer it through the game mechanics. That would go against this principle. So as I still had some privileges which could modify logic contracts, we basically turned off these mechanics and allowed the wrapping of the cities and also minting of new cities on the land plots which were not taken in 2016.
Correct. And this is something that we actually see happen with a lot of these primitive non-fungible products, is this like kind of like, I'm not going to call yours a Ponzi, but kind of these Ponzi-nomics where you buy an NFT and then it gets immediately relisted and then somebody could come in and buy it. This is kind of the same thing, right? Where you could get conquered and then the token is transferred to the next person. But just so I have this right, that token, the token is technically transferable, right? Because if you conquer a city, it gets transferred to another person. But you can't, but originally you couldn't transfer the token manually, correct?
Well, originally there was no such thing as a token. Basically, you had a map with cities which were all, it was all state in this original contract, and there you would conquer a city or whatnot. And then we turned off this conquering mechanics. So now each city is an NFT, and you cannot conquer other cities. So you can normally trade with them. It's ERCs 7-1. So, and each time you transfer a token, this is where historic value comes in. So let's say you have this city, okay? And now that if you would transfer this token to another person, actually in the 2016 contract, this new address would get encoded and written as, being this plot of land being owned by this new person. So actually this ERC 7-1 wrapper reflects the state in the 2016 contract.
Got it. So let's take it back to 2016. What exactly was being transferred then? If it wasn't a token, if your plot was being conquered, what was being transferred to the conqueror?
So you just had, I don't know if you know a bit about Solidity, but it was just a 2-dimensional array, like 33 by 33, and there it said like on position, row 12, column 14, I don't know. There's this structure that describes a city, and the owner of that, is this person and so on. But, back then this ERC 7-1 standard didn't exist. So all this ownership was managed inside this contract. And you actually didn't have a way to just say, I want to transfer a city to someone else. You were an owner of a city, and then you could conquer another city, but you couldn't trade with cities. That's something that's, was introduced by NFTs.
Got it. Okay, yeah, I'm not a dev, but please lay out all of the technicals, because I'm assuming there's going to be a ton of devs who are going to listen to this, and then they could kind of group in it. So it does predate ERC20, right? The token standard. The only other project that I could compare this to is Etheria, which also predates ERC20 tokens. Have you looked into that contract at all, or those contracts?
Not in detail. I'm aware of that project, and then PixelMap also came out a bit later. I myself am not like huge, historic buff in a way that I explore these projects a lot. For me, it's more like mechanics are more interesting, and so how we did this wrapping was that Adam, who is into historic NFTs, he approached me, and then it was like this project has historic value, but I wasn't studying much other historic projects actually.
Right.
I only found out quite recently that there was like whole community behind this, into this, discovering these projects and so on.
Take me a little bit through the Rediscovery project. Adam reaches out to you, and you get, both of you have conversation back and forth about wrapping this. Did you create the wrapper? Was a third party brought in? And how long? Where were you when Adam reached out to you and said that maybe you have some sort of history and value that exists here?
I was in Croatia, working on another crypto project, which I won't talk much about. It's basically decentralized freelancing market. I was just busy with that. So he reached out to me actually. Also, he has a colleague who's more who's a dev person. So I talked initially more with that guy, and then we also discussed. Yeah, they approached me and said there's historic value here, but we need to, try to figure out how to technically, do this, because there are many challenges, especially when it comes to this original mechanics regarding conquering other cities.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, and then you launched these. They were minted at 0.88 ETH, which is fairly high comparative to a lot of the other projects. Looking back at it, do you believe that it was priced fairly, priced too high, should have went lower? What are some of your thoughts about that? Because it seems like it has stifled some organic growth because of the high entry fee.
Yeah, I mean, one factor is simply the launch time, where NFT bull was kind of already passing. So I think if everything was same, and let's say we launched 2 or 3 months earlier, then the map would have sold out probably. So it's not really. So I think price was pretty fair. I mean, in retrospect, would have we made it a bit lower. Yeah, maybe, but I think. Historic projects will keep their value, and when there is a next bull market, I don't see any problem with this. Our reference was more other projects and the size of their map, and what's their tile value. So, if you have a project which is 4,000 squares, ours is 1,000, so we kind of use that as a reference, and I think it was priced pretty reasonably.
Okay, yeah.
You can see the map is quite small. It's only 1,000 squares, so.
Correct. So if you're comparing it to PixelMap, where PixelMap was 0.25 at 4,000 squares, here you have 1,156, and you kind of just scale it upwards to 0.88. And if it would have fully minted out, it would have had roughly about the same revenue as PixelMap, which comes around the same time as each other. So, okay, that actually makes more sense. I know it's caused a little bit of animosity. Do you remember by chance what the original website was, what the domain was?
Yeah, it was actually hosted on bspan.com, which was some kind of Bitcoin marketplace that I was doing back then, and then it was /play.eth, I think, but that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I could upload the front end somewhere else, but the point is, you wouldn't be able to play through that original project front end, because you these mechanics were turned off because as I mentioned, you could conquer other cities there.
Yeah, if you could post the original website at some point, I'd be interested to see how this compares to.
It's small. You can easily find it on YouTube because I posted. It was not a podcast, but I talked myself about this project. It's a video from 2016. Actually, that's how Adam and this tech guy they found me by finding this.
Oh, this one right here.
That's it. Yeah. So it's 5 years ago. So you can see how the map looked like. It was just color coded, so each player had their color, but there was nothing unique about cities apart from their name. So they didn't have these images. Yeah. But you can see you had buildings and units inside, and you could attack and move units, and so it had rather complex mechanics. But these mechanics were not in line with the NFT principle.
Right. Yeah. NFT was introduced in 2018, so a lot of people try to apply the 2018 standards retroactively, and it just does not fit, especially when you move to some of the other primitive chains of Bitcoin and Namecoin and some of the other ones.
But what's really exciting for me is that we are building new mechanics, so what's called layer 2, as you know. And it won't be possible to conquer cities, but you could make other cities your vessels so that you get part of their production. So now each city will be generating ERC20 production, and you will still have units, buildings, and even more stuff, but it will be in line with the NFT principles of not really, not being able to just take someone's NFT, but there will be mechanics. And I think these new mechanics will be more long-lived, because with these mechanics of conquering cities, it's a problem that a game can kind of quickly degenerate, where one powerful player starts conquering more and more cities, and then other players just disappear from the map. While in the new mechanics, someone can make you your vessel, so they can kind of conquer you, but you still have some control over the city, and you can rebel later. So there's this mechanics that will be the new layer 2. So I think it will be much more interesting than the original mechanics.
Do you remember, or do you know how many players you had back in 2016 playing the game?
About 20 something, with about 50 cities in total.
And those are still shown on here as the original players?
Right. Yeah, so you can see in the gray squares, that's where there are some of the original cities, but which haven't been wrapped yet. So they are kind of there, but because the original owners, they either don't know about this new wrapper, or they actually lost private keys, so they have no access to their cities. So, but they are shown as reserved, and some others have been wrapped already. So, but this upper left quadrant was where most of the activity was taking place back in the original contract in 2016.
Yeah, interesting. So there's a where is this at? There's a layer 2. We'll talk about this here in a second. Tell me a little bit more about this layer 2 project. What have you decided on? What L2 to deploy it on? Is some of the revenue generated from this sale is what's contributing to the funding of this? Are you coding the layer 2?
Absolutely.
And is the addition of the game something that was originally visualized back in 2016, or is this just something that you're trying to modernize based off of how the space has grown since?
Yeah, I try to modernize it based on how the space has grown since. In the meantime, I was mostly focused on CryptoTest, this decentralized freelancing market. So I kind of lay this to the side. And but when I found out there's interest, I came up with this idea of layer 2. And the more I thought about it, I actually realized it could be even more fun and hopefully more long-lasting than the original game. So yeah, you also asked about how layer 2 would be deployed, and we decided on Polygon due to high gas fees on Ethereum network. So even though ERC-721 is Ethereum-based token, there is state transfer between Ethereum and Polygon. So all people who own these cities will be automatically able to play layer 2 without and in a way that they won't have to lock their ERC-721. That's the good part about how Polygon uses this state transfer. You will just be able to play. You won't have to lock it into some bridge or anything. So you will be able, to have the token unlocked and even list it on OpenSea or whatever, and at the same time play the layer 2 game.
Interesting. Okay. Is there a timeline? I mean, I don't want to put any timeline out there, but how far along has the progress been of this L2? Because it'll probably encourage some incentives to then mint out the game if there proves to be a token associated with it or some other additional features.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a few months until we won't release all the features, but because there's a lot of balancing in the game, we need to be careful that the first set of features that we launch is already balanced. So yeah, I would say a few months from now, but it's quite complex mechanics, and again, you have this interaction between Polygon and Ethereum, so that makes it even a bit more complex. And there will be ERC-20 on Polygon, so if you have a city, you will be automatically generating revenue, and you will be able either to simply withdraw this and trade on Uniswap, or you will be able to invest back into the game and buy units, build units, improvements. There will be culture artifacts and so on.
Interested to see. So here I have pulled up the Reddit from 6 years ago, and you began to post on here, and there's some comments, some misunderstandings. Even talking about ETC. When you went about creating this, was this just you? Was it just a one-man team with a vision, or did you have some help with creating this custom contract? Sorry to go back a little bit.
It was just me. I wrote both backend, so Solidity contract, and also this JavaScript frontend, but I'm not good in frontend development at all. So you could see that graphics were quite shitty. Back then it was just me. But now since we also have this funding from the sale, we have people doing GIFs, and we have a designer and artist and a front-end guy, and but I'm still doing backend. So I'm doing smart contract development, but luckily I don't have to do this other stuff that I'm not good at.
Okay, yeah, it's quite interesting. And now I want to dive on a little bit to some turmoil that existed within the community. And here I pulled up the tweet where it talks about how you listen to your holders. There was a vote that happened about this private key burn. It wasn't originally disclosed, maybe unintentional or not, which I'll let you expand on. Basically, when some I guess you just call them auditors looked through the contract, they found that you had access to the keys, which then caused a lot of concern within the historical NFT community, because in light, if you become a bad actor, whether that actually happens or not, you can then basically repossess all of the NFTs or whatever they were at the time, which then this led to a community vote to where you burned the keys to the contract, and so that therefore nobody can have some sort, or the risk was then eliminated. Of course, they have to trust that they were burnt in the right way. So just tell us a little bit about why was this omitted? Was it purposely done? Was it just like not a concern at the time because of the mechanics of the game and how they were essentially turned off? And just from your perspective, I'm interested to hear. There was a large character assassination that was happening, and I think it was kind of unfair that you weren't able to dive a little bit deeper on some of the stuff that had happened. Obviously, there was some there was some time between the community resentment to your response. So just let's focus a little bit on this, because I think we need to uncover some more.
Yes. So from my side, how this process went was that I was mostly communicating with Adam's tech guy, and the only way how we could do a wrapper was that basically these old logic contracts are removed, their privileges. Okay, so you had three contracts. You had one state contract which held which cities in the game exist and what is on what place on the map. And then there were two logic contracts which had privileges to write into the state contract. And I had the privileges to change what these logic contracts were. And the idea that we came up with was that basically this new NFT wrapper, which is a new contract, is given the privileges of all logic contracts. So this way, the old logic would be turned off, and the new contract, new wrapper, would be given privileges to write into the 2016 state contract. And at that point, I obviously disclosed this to Adam's tech guy, and I basically left the whole communication part to the community, basically to them, and I was more just doing the development. So I think here something was maybe not communicated transparently, but from my point of view was I actually wasn't into historic NFTs, and I didn't have like a feel for what was considered, what people were interested in, and so on. So so when some people started complaining about this, I was quite annoyed with this situation, because I felt like I was not doing this part of community management and the whole launch process, more like technical development, and I was quite transparent there to to Adam and his tech guy, but somehow this maybe wasn't communicated in the best way to the general audience.
Right. Yeah. And here I'm playing the video for those that are watching. This is the burn of what I assume is the keys to get into the code, or that to access the contract on the back end. And it looks like you're about to light it on fire. How do we assume that you didn't create a copy of this? Right, you are burning it, which is obviously what's happening here on the screen. But you could have easily just wrote down another copy to it. Was there any sort of preventive mechanisms in that set in place here, or you're just doing what the community said because this is based off of the vote that went down?
Yeah, I basically did what community voted for. There were some other options, but they all had some drawbacks. There is actually no way that you can prove that you really destroyed all the copies of private keys. So there was a lot of discussion about this. The main argument why it would make no sense that I change the privileges of 2016 contract again is that it wouldn't be a rational decision, because the old contract, well, the current wrapper would lose a lot of its value. I mean, these tokens would still be transferable and all would look kind of the same on OpenSea, just that it wouldn't reflect back into the 2016 contract. So obviously some historic value would be lost here, but let's assume I do something like this, then obviously any next project I would launch launch based on this 2016 contract would have such bad reputation that I would, lose the current project, and the new one would be worthless as well. So there was then discussion, what if I go insane or something like this? So, but the fact that I destroyed it now, and some community members said, like, it seems that he's rational now, so that's some kind of backup that in case I go insane later and become irrational, then at least I wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. So the financial incentives are probably the strongest motivator to prevent you from having some sort of malicious attempt at destroying everyone's beloved NFT tokens that exist now in this historic asset. It's quite interesting. Yeah. We do have one other. I know there's a handful of instances of historical NFT creators burning tokens or burning keys to contract address. We just this happened with Mooncats. This attempted to happen.
It's basically some kind of trade-off that, as an investor, I mean, personally, I'm more interested in layer 2. So there's this side. I mean, obviously, other people can believe it or not, but I'm not really that much interested in this historic aspect. I just want to develop a great new layer 2. Mm-hmm. But I understand why people have these concerns. So, but talking from historic perspective, I think as an investor, you would judge here, there is maybe some risk and some things are not perfect, but then you would say, this project is from 2016, so I think it's the second oldest. So basically, it's all about having this, trade-off. You can look at the, at the current price and say, okay, there's this risk, but there is great historic value, so it's up to the people to decide, what's it worth.
Correct.
I'm sure it reduces some of the value, obviously, but, and then as time goes by, I think this problem will get, further and further reduced. Like, let's say 20 years from now, I think it will be highly unlikely that if I haven't done something by then, so I think eventually this project will just increase in value, but obviously people...
Right, we're
to make their own decisions.
Right, we're participating in this public discourse so that we could set up parameters to help dictate the value within the community, but also debating semantics. This specific instance is one of dozens of instances within the historical community of different points of view pertaining to different topics, different eras, different groupings. So you're definitely not alone here. There was a recent topic, which I know we've covered a little bit, but I just want to make sure that we have it here. They're talking about unwrapping, right? So we mentioned that on the original 2016 contract, there's no token because there's no token standard. And so here the conversation is that they're talking about unwrapping, right? If we wrapped Etherization, you're saying that there's no token to unwrap too. Can you just elaborate on what prevents the unwrapping, or if somebody tried to unwrap it, what happens?
Yes, so there's nothing that prevents it, but let's say we did implement unwrap, it would be useless, because what unwrapping means is that if you have, let's say, the original contract, when you unwrap back there, you can do everything that you could do in the original game, right? But the thing with Etherization is that its mechanics were, well, quite complex, and let's say if you have pixel map, you have just basically state there's some image at certain position, but Etherization had very complex mechanics with armies and conquering and all that stuff. So if you were to unwrap to the original game and we kept all these old mechanics, it would be incompatible with the idea of NFTs being completely yours and unable to change ownership unless you want to. So in that way, it's not possible to unwrap into the original game, because to make it NFT compatible, we had to turn off the original logic. So there is the original state of the game, like the original map, but the logic of the game has been turned off. So it's the original game is not intact. So in that sense, there's no this original game to unwrap.
Got it.
But that's just like the reality of historic projects, where if you have very old project with original mechanics, back then no one was thinking about some ERC 721 standard that would come out later.
Correct. Yeah. Again, it comes down to this like chicken or the egg thing, where you're applying 2018 to 2022 parameters to the historical NFTs, where it just like it doesn't fit. It's putting a square in a circle peg, essentially. So there has to be some sort of trade-offs.
Yeah, and then we explained there is also FAQ in our Discord, so it's explained in detail, and everyone can check that if there is a ERC 721 token, in which way they can check on Etherscan in 2016 contract that this state is reflected. So there is no doubt that there is completely transparent historic link there to 2016 contract. But I think some people come to Discord and then there is a lot of fun because they just apply concepts like they have seen there is this unwrap in some other project, and then they try to force this idea onto this project. But every project is unique in some ways. So I would just suggest that people, before maybe criticizing, they read FAQ at least, so they try to figure out what's going on here.
Correct. So now diving in, looking at, now that we've covered some of the early adventures of the project, we're now moving into, I have OpenSea pulled up, looking at all of these different pixel arts that exist at various pricings. We know that there's 4 different quadrants. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind, obviously, Civilization is the inspiration for the game, but the 4 different quadrants are based off of different themes. I believe there's I'm not even sure how to describe it, but tell us a little bit about the different themes of each quadrant. How did you come up with the pixel art for all of these different buildings or castles that are used in the game? And then also, where were the images hosted in the original contract, and then today, where are they hosted?
Okay, so as I mentioned, actually, you didn't have these images in the original contract. So there were city names, but cities didn't have unique images. So the historic value is only in land and in the position. But the images themselves, they are not historic. They were generated, well, not generated. They were drawn by artists for this recent ERC 721 sale. So yeah, that's about the images. They're hosted on IPFS, so they're decentralized and all that. But to be completely transparent, the images are not historic.
Correct.
So yeah, and what you asked about quadrants. So when we were deciding on the art style for these tokens, then we kind of, because the old game had this like 90s feel with the very very basic art. So we decided for pixel art, and that's how we instructed artists. And the quadrants are basically about, well, if you look at the world, then you could say, Northwest is more like Western culture, and Northeast is Oriental, and Southeast is maybe Middle Eastern Indian, and Southwest is inspired by, some Native American cultures like Inca, Maya, Aztec, and these. It was just, so that's also not historic. The map is historic and the tile positions, but this art was just recent edition where I thought it would be, it would just make this universe more fun, and because I like Civilization, I also like this idea of having different cultures on the map.
Right, you're creating lore into the project, which is what you have to do if you're, especially if you're a storyteller.
Yeah.
So here I pulled up Civilization just to look. I've heard the game. I've never actually played Civilization. It says here that it's been around for 30 years, so it is quite a historic game within itself.
Yes, I played it in the early 90s. But you could have cities and armies, and one thing that Etherization doesn't have but Civilization has is, for example, you have technologies as well. So you would progress through these stages of ancient history and then to Middle Ages and so on.
Do you plan on adding some additional lore, maybe some new features in L2?
So we are progressively revealing Layer 2 mechanics through these GIFs on Twitter. We still haven't released the full white paper, but there will definitely be more mechanics than there was in the original game. Just some things I mentioned was, turning other cities into vessels, and then you could have this network of, a lot of revenue, ERC20 revenue coming into your city. But then you would also have to prevent other cities from rebelling. So this military aspect has been revamped. But now there's also culture. For example, you could build your civilization more around the rare artifacts and generate revenue through pilgrims coming to your cities. So I think that's quite interesting because you have now different styles of play. And there are also then all various upgrades that you will be able to build, and there will be also government types. Like you could have more despotic government types if you're more into, which will be more in line with military style of play, or you could have republic and these kind of government types, which will be better for the economy. Your revenue will be better, but it will not be so much in line with having large armies and this sort of play. So but all that will be revealed soon.
Soon TM, my friend. So can this layer 2 be deployed or find success even without a fully minted map? Do you believe that that's do you believe that's a challenge still to get the community around this quote unquote FUD, mint out the project so that you have a heavy amount of players participating in this new game?
Well, for layer 2, there is no requirement on map being fully minted. It would work completely fine with the current state of the map. So, and for current city holders, it would be unreasonable not to play the new game, because they will be automatically, their cities will be generating revenue there. So they will probably want to check what's going on. But if some players are passive, they will probably just become vassals of some other players who will be active in the game. So obviously I don't expect all the current owners to play the new game, but some will definitely play it. And regarding the new players, I know the entry price is high, so we don't maybe expect minting to go crazy, but we will be working on marketing in various directions. And also at some point, I think the interest in historic NFTs will also come back. So at some point, I don't think about the map or how fully it's minted. I don't see that as much of an issue. And one interesting thing about the entry price is there will be a new NFT which is called Citizen NFT, which will basically be able to live inside the city. So there's a whole mechanic around this. Its entry price will be much lower, in the range of $100 to $200. So I think this will expand community a lot in a way that you will be able to stake the citizen inside some city, and then both the owner of the city will get some benefit, and you will be generating some revenue to your citizen. And what's really interesting is that for citizens, it will be very important to figure out which city holders will have the best strategies. So, because if you're a citizen in a rich city, you will be proportionally also earning. So I think it will create a whole metaverse of, people maybe talking on Discord and, city owners. Like if you call them aristocracy, they will be explaining to citizenry like what their strategies will be and why you should come and live in my city. So that's one strategy how we will address also the high entry barrier and have something more accessible to the general community who are into play to earn games.
Through having this conversation, I see this weird predicament that you find yourself in, right? You created this game in 2016 because you just truly enjoy Civilization, you enjoy just kind of innovation. And then Adam and co came to you, presented this historical NFT narrative, kind of revived the project. Although you're not really too concerned about the historical project, yes, it gave you funding, and you've been very transparent with everything that's happened. You just want to continue to build on the original vision and then integrate new modern approaches to it. Do I have this right? Is this kind of like how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what's going on.
Right, I see it. Yeah, so it's kind of a weird because you have the historical NFT maxis who just want to debate every little detail to it. You got the funding through the historical narrative, and there are some people who will probably find value in this. And then once the historical NFT community grows, most people probably won't care. I'm going to be honest. You will have the treasure hunters who will debate it and FUD it or whatever the case is, but whether it's an actual NFT, I don't know. It's weird. I'm interested to see how this follows out, especially if the Layer 2 game becomes popular and profitable or just fun. Then most people will end up buying wrapped Etherization for the game and not actually for the historical value itself. So that narrative I could see actually over that narrative can commandeer the historical NFT narrative, and then it could just be an old vintage game that's innovated in a sense. So it's going to be interesting to follow.
Yeah, it's hard to say which of these two avenues will be more important. Like, I think with time, this historic component, even though I'm not very interested in it, I think I'm just being realistic. I think it will definitely come into play, because if something is, how this NFT, the number of contracts, like it goes and then it expands suddenly. So, in 2025, 2016 project will be even more, historic. So, and even recently, even though we are not in NFT bull, like when some important people tweeted about historic NFTs, our floor price quickly went above 1 ETH. So we even weren't working much on that, or it's just like the fact of how timeline goes. So, but yeah, as you mentioned, there's also this completely other component that brings value to the project, which is the game mechanics. It's very hard to predict what will happen here, and obviously the entry price is very high. But we will see what happens. It's hard to predict.
Right. It's the entry price is expensive, 0.88 for maybe the historical community, but I mean, if we've seen across the NFT space, the apes will pay literally any price. They don't care, right? Like Moonbirds just went up to 30.
Right. The map is small, and there's definitely people for who 0.88 is not that much. So maybe it's out of bounds for like general play to earn audience, but there's definitely a segment here which can afford it. And as I mentioned, as the map is small, I think there will be players.
Well, Vedran, sorry, I butchered that at the end. God damn it!
It's good.
I really appreciate you for coming on and having this conversation. It's easy, and it's a general path for many people to kind of just hide behind the screen and just talk through text. But being able to, verbalize the emotion, the interest, and just having a peer-to-peer conversation, I think is very important to help those who are interested in the project to really understand more and see both sides of the conversation. So thank you really for joining. If I don't know, do you have any last words to anybody before we get out of here? Anything that I missed?
Well, I would just suggest to the people who are interested to follow Discord and Twitter. Everything is there. We are constantly updating Twitter with new GIFs, which I think are quite cool, and they reveal the new mechanics. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope those give them a follow, or at least go into the Discord and just generate conversation, whether it's good or bad. It's both. It's very important to understand both sides of the table, and I thank both of you for listening and watching, whatever you're doing. We'll catch you next time.